A new era for DC has arrived with James Gunn's DCU, but does Superman deliver? I got a lot to discuss. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. So today I've got my review of a big one of the biggest movies of 2025, Superman. The film is directed by James Gunn, and it marks the beginning of the DCU in terms of movies, because technically Creature Commandos, the show on Max, was part of the DCU. But this is the first DCU movie. There's a lot riding on this movie, lots of pressure for this to be a win, and I have a lot to talk about. Before I get into it, hit that like button, comment down below your thoughts on the movie if you've seen it, as well as your predictions or expectations if you have not yet watched it. And of course, subscribe to that notification bell to help reach my goal of 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. So I want to give you my background with DC and Superman before we get into this review. It's always good to give a little context if you're a new viewer here. I have a rocky relationship with the DCEU. In fact, I hated a good chunk of those movies. But my favorite of that cinematic universe was The Suicide Squad, directed by James Gunn. When it comes to James Gunn's past work, I'm a big fan of everything. Peacemaker, Creature Commandos, Guardians, like all three of them. So he hasn't missed in the comic book movie genre when it comes to directing. And then when it comes to Superman, I've seen the first two Christopher Reeve films very recently, mind you. I'm still going to work my way through those throughout this week and do a ranking of all the Superman movies, so be on the lookout for that. And then I saw Man of Steel in theaters. I'd seen BVS, Justice League, all that stuff. So I'm not a huge Superman fan. I much prefer characters like Spider-Man or Batman. Those are the ones I grew up on, playing, video games, watching movies, shows, all that. So Superman's never been my superhero. The one I'm the most obsessed with, the one I care about the most. I've never been honestly a Superman fan, I guess you could say. I mean, I like the character, but I prefer other superheroes by a good bit. So I'm pretty neutral coming into this movie. So I'm viewing this movie and went in very unbiased. And I walk out, and the main thing I wanted from this movie was it to be a step in the right direction for DC, and I can confidently say that's what it is. This is a very solid start to this cinematic universe. I've got my pros, I've got my cons. I'm going to start with my pros first. The cast. I got to address the elephant in the room. They nailed it. They nailed it. David Corenswet embodies what Superman should be. Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane shines. And to me, the relationship between those two characters is a strong point of the movie. Seeing those two characters interact as just two human beings, not Superman suited up, they made for some of the most memorable moments in the movie. In fact, you go into a Superman movie and you expect, action, spectacle, and sure, it's got those moments, but to me, the real winners here were the smaller character moments that humanized Superman, that humanized everyone, and really allowed the audience to actually get to know these characters. When we had those moments, that's when I thought the movie excelled. Notably, there are some moments with Superman and his family, Pa Kent in particular, and those scenes pulled on the heartstrings. You could argue even got the tears swelled. Like, those were scenes that to me embodied what Superman's all about and let us know who this character in this universe is. I cared more about the less flashy scenes and more about the smaller dialogue-driven scenes that packed more of an emotional punch, in my opinion. I also have to address Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. He shines here. In my opinion, it's the best performance in the movie. He's a maniacal madman, and Lex Luthor, he's got the brains and he's a show-off in a sense with his wit and his ability to outsmart characters, and we see that on full display here. Nicholas Hoult having a lot of fun in this role, being a dastardly little man, dare I say. He is so evil in this movie. Just there's little mannerisms he has. There's some dark comedy, to me at least, that worked. And I felt like his character just brought an energy to the movie. I wanted even more out of Lex Luthor because he was, to me, the standout performance, Nicholas Hoult. Krypto's in this movie, arguably the MVP. If you're a dog lover, you're gonna have multiple moments where you're just like, aww. You heard that collectively in the theater I was watching through. It was nice to see that companionship that he had with Superman throughout this movie. You can see the love between him and Superman. That bond just goes to show the heart of Superman in this movie. In fact, there's a message, a big takeaway here that I found to be just inspiring and hopeful, and that's that we're all humans at the end of the day. We get knocked down, we have our bad days, we make our mistakes, but it's about getting back up, putting one foot in front of the other, and bettering yourself and overcoming that adversity. It's a universal experience, this life that we're living, and Superman really nails that message by the end of like, hey, we all make mistakes. You gotta keep moving. You gotta keep living, man. L-I-V-I-N, to quote McConaughey in Dazed and Confused.
You just gotta keep living, man. L-I-V-I-N.
And I thought they nailed that message. It was hopeful, and that's what Superman should bring to the big screen, hope. What's crazy, though, is Superman is not the only hero in this film, and it's no surprise. You've seen the marketing. We've got Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific. I found that those supporting characters were even taking some of the spotlight away from Superman in his own movie. I'll talk about that in a second, but I really liked some of those additions, and I want more out of those characters, notably Mr. Terrific. He was a scene stealer for me, and I think that's going to be the consensus. Like, multiple moments with this character where he showcases his powers and he's kind of like taking control of a mission. You're just like, this guy's awesome. I want to see a movie about Mr. Terrific and the rest of this gang. And of course, the score here has its moments to shine. It wasn't as memorable as, say, Man of Steel score, and I know that that's probably just sparked some debate in the comments. The Man of Steel score is an all-time one, guys. It's Hans Zimmer. It's Hans Zimmer, period. That score, to me, is one of the best, not only in a superhero movie, but ever. I listen to it all the time to get amped up. This score doesn't reach those heights. There's not, to me at least, a moment where the score blares and I'm like, yeah! I was waiting for it. We never got it, to me, but the score still does have its moments to hit. It's also less soundtrack heavy. With James Gunn and comic book movies, you're kind of trained to be waiting for the next needle drop. That's not the case here. It's a lot more of a score-based film with, you know, quieter moments. When we do get the occasional needle drop, I'm like, okay, I can see what they're doing here, but it's not like a soundtrack-driven film like, say, Guardians or The Suicide Squad, so definitely know that going in. But the movie is far from perfect in my opinion. It's a solid start to what DC needs, but we can talk about some negatives here as well. This is not a perfect movie to me. I'm gonna just be honest with you. That's what I always strive to do here in these reviews. So first and foremost, this movie throws you into an already established DC universe with characters who've been around for years. So this is not a Superman origin story. Compared to Superman from 1978 and compared to Man of Steel, it's drastically different across the board. And that can work to its benefit at sometimes, but also it's just so vastly different from any other Superman movie that I've personally seen that it did take a second to adjust. This movie almost feels like a sequel. It expects the audience to have already watched 2 or 3 hours of this version of Superman, and that's just not the case. Like, yes, the movie trusts the audience to understand Superman's origin, and we know that. If you've seen any piece of Superman media, read a comic, any of that stuff, like, you know who Superman is, you know his backstory, so the movie trusts you to understand that. But even like the dynamics between characters and just the other existing heroes in this world, like the power dynamics, all that stuff is kind of just thrown onto you, and you're expected to just buy in out the jump just because, oh, it's Superman. And I felt like the movie didn't do as much legwork to get you, the audience, to buy in to Clark Kent, to Superman, to these different characters and their relationships as much as I would have liked, because it's like, oh, well, these people have already seen a Superman movie. Not to compare everything to the MCU, but in the MCU, we had Spider-Man introduced after we already had the Tobey trilogy and the Garfield movies. And so Tom Spider-Man didn't need a full-on origin story, right? We didn't need to see him get bit by the spider, but still in like a 4-minute scene in Civil War, we knew everything we needed to know about the character and like his identity as a human being, like the message that Uncle Ben instilled in him, all that was made evident in 4 minutes. And then when we get Homecoming, it's like a soft origin story. That worked to me better than this, because here, there's just a lot going on. It's not just Superman's story. And like I alluded to earlier, I felt like some of the side characters stole the thunder from Superman in his own movie. Notably Guy Gardner and Mr. Terrific. They had more moments, I felt, where the crowd was like, woo, or like got a good laugh out of them. And even talking action here, 2 of the coolest action scenes in the movie don't really involve Superman, which was fascinating. It was different, it was unexpected, not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just not what I guess I thought I was gonna get. I think I can safely say this isn't the movie I thought it was gonna be. It's got its James Gunn moments where like, that's James Gunn. That feels like something ripped from like Guardians 3, for example, with one of the action scenes. But then there's also a moment where you're like, oh, this is not like anything he's directed before. And I think the reason is Superman's a lot more of a serious character by nature to me. He's messed around in this world of the Guardians and the Suicide Squad with these obscure, goofy, wacky, quirky characters who he makes so lovable and have an endearing charm to them by the end of those movies. Here, it's a lot more straightforward, a lot more cut and dry with who these characters are and who Superman is. And I'm not saying Superman's a boring character, but he is undeniably more of a vanilla guy. He's kind of like Captain America, you know, and that's all right. But I've always been a little more interested in those characters that can operate in that gray area sometimes. Not a bad thing, it's just this is not the kind of lead character I'm used to seeing James Gunn have. But a big thing, like I said, is out the gate, it can be somewhat jarring to jump into this literally middle of a fight scene. And it's like, whoa, I feel like I missed something. And by the time we get to the final act of this movie, final 30, 45 minutes, it is filled with some of those obligatory comic book movie third act scenes. And I think you'll you'll know what I mean. There's one reveal that I was like, not crazy about that. Like, people often say, oh, there's like a portal in the sky or beam in the sky, and every movie, like even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers, Ghostbusters, like you may or may not dabble in that a bit here, and it just didn't feel necessary. It wasn't the most compelling set piece for the third act, in my opinion. But the movie ends in a good spot. I think that Superman has a nice arc in this movie that pulls on the heartstrings, certainly, and inspires hope. And that's what a Superman movie should do. This is not a dark film for the most part. It's fairly lighthearted. But at the end of the day, Superman is a movie that DC needed to start this new era. It's far from perfect, but it's enjoyable, it's got its moments to shine, and Nicholas Hoult is a highly memorable villain as Lex Luthor. I dug the smaller character moments more than the in-your-face action, and I really, if you want the God's honest truth, didn't think this movie was as action-packed as people are saying, at least in terms of memorable action moments. But that's okay. I cared a lot more about the moments where Superman's not suited up. And I found that with the other two Superman movies, the first two from, the 70s and 80s, that I care more about just seeing this internal conflict of Clark trying to balance being Clark Kent and having a relationship with Lois, but also being Superman and defending the world in Metropolis. So I've always been more fond of those moments. That's just where I'm coming from. So this Superman movie is unique. It does feel like it's balancing a lot with being the first film in a universe at times, having lots of new characters introduced. It can be jarring. It can be a bit disorienting. Be like, oh, wow, that's just a relationship that's been around for insert number of years here. But it might be what DC needs. And so I'm hopeful for the future. I mean, they have Supergirl coming out next year. The movie didn't go out of its way to like set up 30 different sequels or like the Justice League or anything, which I'm cool with. It was its own movie, and there are 2 post-credit scenes. I won't say what they are. You should stick around and watch them, but you don't have like monumental expectations for those. It's just a solid DC movie. And when we're comparing this to what they've been pumping out for the past 5 years almost at this point, it's way more watchable and enjoyable than I'd say 90% of the DCEU. I'm down for more of these movies. I hope David Corenswet's able to play the character for years to come, and I am curious to see what other stories there are to tell with this version of Superman in the DCU. Not the DCEU, the DCU. But that does it for my honest review of Superman. Let me know your thoughts down below if you've seen it as of watching this review, as well as your hopes, your expectations, your predictions if you haven't yet seen it. And of course, subscribe to that notification bell to help reach my goal of 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. It means quite a bit. Stay tuned for my ranking of all the Superman movies dropping later this week. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Until next time, we'll see you guys later.